Hello guys, we are into the 11th session of our discussion on the medical research fundamentals. Today's discussion will be about the sampling methods, and starting with sampling is a procedure by which some members of the population are selected as representatives of the entire population. Study population is that the population to which results of a study will be inferred to, and the sample needs to be the representative of the population in terms of time, place and person. In terms of time, it should represent the seasonality, day of week, time of day. And in place, it should mention whether it is urban or rural, and in person, it should be specific to the age, sex and other demographic characters. And the definition of some of the sampling terms: sampling unit is that which is the basic sampling unit. An elementary unit sampled is the people, healthcare workers or hospitals. Sampling frame is the list of all the sampling units in the population. Sampling scheme is the method to select the sample units from the sampling frame. Now, why do we sample a population? It's to obtain the info of the large populations, and it is to ensure the efficacy of a study, and it is to obtain more accurate info. Types of samples are non-probability samples and probability samples. Non-probability samples are those that are the probability of being selected is unknown, and the convenience sample is biased or best or worst scenario. Subjective samples are those that are based on the knowledge and there is time source constraints. Probability samples are that every sample in every unit in the population has known probability of being selected. Only sampling method that allows to draw valid conclusions about the population. Now, random sampling in a probability samples. It removes the possibility of bias in the selection of subjects, and it ensures that each subject has a known probability of being chosen. It allows the application of statistical theory also. Now, coming to the sampling errors. No sample is a perfect mirror image of the population. The magnitude of the error can be measured in the probability samples only, and it is expressed by standard error of mean, proportion or difference, and it is the function of the sampling size. It is the function of the sampling size and the variability in the measurement. Now, methods used in the probability samples are simple random sampling, systemic sampling, stratified sampling, cluster sampling and multi-stage sampling. Coming to the simple random sampling, it is based on the concept that equal chance is for each of the sampling unit, and the procedure is that we should number all the units and then randomly draw the units, and it has an advantage that this is simple and sampling error is easily measured, and disadvantage is that it needs complete list of the units and does not allow always achieves the best representatives. And systemic sampling is that a unit drawn every k unit, equal chance of being drawn from each unit, and the procedure is that we have to calculate the sampling interval and then draw a random number for starting. So we have to draw every 8th unit. For example, in a set, every 8th sample will be chosen as a sample for the study, and it is ensures that the representativeness across the list, and it is easy to implement. However, it is dangerous if the list has cycles. Stratified sampling is that to classify the population into homogeneous subgroups and then draw a sample in each data, and then to combine the results of all the strata. It is more precise if variables are associated with strata. However, all the subgroups represented allows separate conclusions about each of them, and it has a disadvantage that the sampling error is difficult to measure and loss of precision if small numbers are sampled in individual strata. For example, to estimate the vaccination across the country, one sample is drawn in each region, and then we have to estimate the calculated of each stratum. Each stratum weighed to obtain the estimate for a country. Now, coming to the cluster sampling, random sampling of groups or clusters of units, and all or proportion of the units included selected clusters. And advantage is that it is simple and no list of units are required, and it is less travel or resources are required. And the disadvantage is that it is imprecise if the clashes are homogeneous or large design effect. Sampling error is difficult to measure, and sampling unit is not a subject but group of subjects or clusters. It's assumed that the variability among the clusters is minimal, and the variability within each cluster is what is observed in the general population. There are two stages of cluster sample. First is that the probability or proportional to size, that is, select the number of clusters to be included, compute a cumulative list of the proportion in each unit and with the grand total. Then we have to divide the grand total by the number of clusters and obtain the sampling interval. Then we have to choose a random number and identify it as the first cluster. Then we have to add the sampling interval, that is the identify as the second cluster. Then by repeating the same procedure to identify all the clusters. Second is that in each cluster we have to select a random sample using a sampling frame of subjects, example a resident or a household or a school going children, etc. Multi-stage sampling is the several chain samples, several statistical units are used, and there is no its advantage that there is no complete listing of the population required, and it's most feasible. And disadvantage is that several sampling lists and several error difficult to measure. Now coming to the summary, as we cannot study the whole sample, whole population, we have to sample the population, and this sampling population leads to sampling error which has to be measured. And for a good valid study, we should have a good design and a good qualitative assurance. And for a good precision of the study, we need to have ample sample size, and it is the probability sample which has the use of statistics in it. So we have to use the probability samples whenever a study is being done. Thank you. Stay tuned for the next discussion about calculating the sample size and power, which is the most important session of all the sessions. And stay tuned. Thank you for your support.